Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 1 of Loosely Scripted, the show with no script, no filters, and most importantly, no rules. For the very first episode, I thought it would be a good idea to bring in my good friend, Conner Scrawny Girvan. Conner, thank you for joining me on the show.
No problem, man. It's a pleasure. Inaugural guest, man. Feels good.
Yeah, you're the first one. It feels like the first time. It's a nice start too, because I personally have never done more like a podcast format. I've done some interview-based shows, but I've never done anything quite like this. So this will be a nice change of pace. I'm not sure if that's kind of the same for you. I know one of your good buddies does have a podcast as well. We'll give him a shout out. Launders used to do, at least, the This Esports Life. Does he still do that show?
This Esports Life. Yeah. He still does it with Squeaks, one of his fellow streaming friends.
Now, why are you not on that show?
Listen, with every good relationship, you need to keep boundaries. So I think that's one of those things that falls under that category.
I mean, I guess
I have to share him, So
you have to make sure that you're giving him ample time with other friends and family. Now, Conner, we've known each other for a long time. I first met you when you were on the come up early on in your career as an esports broadcaster. We have some fun stories, like the whole dog scenario, and some other things, like your walk from Chinatown through Chinatown from the bus station. Yep. But what did you do before you got into this? Like, this was not always a lifelong aspiration for you, or was it?
I mean, specifically commentary and esports commentary, definitely not a lifelong thing. I think I've always kind of been drawn towards performance. And I categorize casting as performance in a lot of ways. I mean, it hinges on Counter-Strike, which to me was a part that wasn't ever a part of the formula. That only happened because of the eventual, love for Counter-Strike that I grew into by playing it. And then secondly, the Reddit video that blew up. Casting was always kind of a joke for me. Not that I didn't take it seriously, but that I never pursued it. I would always tell my friends, I'm going to do that one day. That's going to be my job, as I would commentate, our own matches. But it wasn't until I kind of got that foot in the door with the Reddit video and coming down to Fragadelphia to meet you. That's when I started thinking to myself, damn, I can maybe pull this off. But in terms of before this, when I was in high school, I was drawn towards radio. That's what I thought I was going to end up doing when I went to university and further levels of schooling. Didn't happen. Again, I think it's one of those things where it's you have to be very driven if you want to get your foot in the door with these super competitive industries. And I was never that type of person. I'm kind of lazy. Let's just get that out of the way. Casting kind of fell into my lap, luckily. In some way, it took a lot of determination, took a lot of sacrifices once it all started. But before I got shoved into it, I wouldn't take that first move, and that's just a character flaw of mine.
Now, we'll get back into the backstory in just a second, but you mentioned sacrifices. I can attest to that personally. You have lapped me at this point. Your career has taken off, and that's awesome to watch. But even just, personally, I've had to sacrifice quite a bit, missing holidays, missing birthdays, missing anniversaries. I missed Mother's Day 3 years in a row doing events. What has that sacrifice been like for you? What is that sacrifice? Because I think a lot of people just think we travel the world and talk about video games and it's all a blast. It's not always fun in games, even though it is fun and games.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of games. And I think that the story of sacrifice nowadays is basically the same as a lot of other people in the industry. It's just you're traveling a lot, you miss important dates. I don't have super strong roots with my kind of at home life, in the sense that I don't have children, I don't have a mortgage. So I'm kind of I'm not held down by a lot of stuff that I know other people kind of weigh on them. So I do kind of flow more freely when I'm off at events. I don't worry about home, because I know that what is at home will be there when I come back. I have a very loving girlfriend. I have a very supportive family. Everybody in my circle now kind of gets what I do, and they're even my best friends here, back in Montreal, they give me that leeway. They understand that we're not going to talk for a couple of months because I'm doing a string of events. But when I come home, it's I just left. It's like it was yesterday. I'd say the bigger sacrifices came when I started this. Because my trajectory really wasn't into esports, I was in university for sociology and anthropology. I was in a cooperative work program, which means that like I would do jobs. I had to do 2 jobs per year that were kind of tied into my academics. So it was like a school course, but it also was employment. That's how I got in at the prison. I was doing telemarketing at one point too, like, you know, trying to do like a business portfolio to sociology. So point being, all of that stuff came to a grinding halt. You know, I kind of I quit a really shitty job to go down to that first Fragadelphia. Actually, they wouldn't give me the weekend off, and I was gonna miss a Friday shift. So I called my mom on the Thursday. I'm like, "Yo, I've got this chance. I've been invited to take a bus down to Philly. I have no idea who these people are. I have no idea what I'm doing. But can I quit my job and also therefore take an F in an academic grade, right? Because they were intertwined, like school and work.
It's true.
Can I do this?" And my mom said, "Go for it. Don't even hesitate." You know, like she was all on board. My girlfriend at the time, ex-girlfriend now, for example, we talked sacrifice. Like, she thought I was an idiot. She didn't think we had been dating for like 3 years, and we had created this kind of life plan where we were gonna move away from Canada. We were gonna travel together. None of that ended up working, and I kind of lost that trajectory in life because I saw esports and that's what I wanted, you know, and I had to make that decision.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like you were at a fork in the road. And I was like, either I continue doing what I'm doing now, or I roll the dice and take this chance. And if I screw it up and it all goes to hell, at least I know. At least I know I rolled the dice, though, because there's that fear for a lot of people. And that's something that as you get older, too, like, you were lucky. You were young enough that you can afford to take that risk. Like, I was a little bit older when I started getting involved in this. You know, I was in my late 20s. I was married. I had kids. I was afraid, like, hey, if I take this chance and I start putting in all this extra work, it could all be for naught. And then I would have missed out on years of my kids' childhood, and I would have missed out on all this stuff. It was a huge risk. And multiple times, a little job got dangled in front of my face, like, hey, maybe you could have a full-time career. And I was like, I don't know, man. Like, I need to see it. I need proof. There was even an opportunity for me to move to Europe once or twice. And I was like, dude, I can't risk just uprooting my whole life. And thank God I didn't take those chances, because the reality is they fell apart pretty quickly and just completely evaporated for other people that were involved in those projects. But there are a lot of decisions that we make working in this industry that could either sink us or float us. And sometimes the risk is minimal, but sometimes the risk is great. So it's kind of wild hearing that backstory. Now, before you got into esports, you mentioned this job you had, this job you quit before you came to Fragadelphia. Was that the prison job?
No, it was actually the telemarketing job.
So even worse.
Yeah, even worse. That's right. Yeah. I went from a real prison to a cubicle prison.
Yikes.
And the cubicle was worse.
What were you selling?
Ink cartridges.
A natural transition from ink cartridge salesman. You could have had it all. You should have stayed in the ink game.
Well, I'm not gonna lie, man. You know, I think it was a time, like, the job itself sucked. The environment sucked. You know, I feel for telemarketers because it's like the bosses would so obviously be benefiting from all of your tedious phone calls. You know, like, literally, it started off calling businesses, so I didn't feel so bad. You know, you were calling a business in order to see if they needed ink cartridges, and if you think about it, it's like that person's being paid just like I am to answer the phone. So if I'm being paid to make the phone call and he's being paid to answer the phone, I didn't feel that bad. But then once I got good at it, like, once, you know, of all the people who kind of start, like, they hire you in bunches. There was like 6 of us on the first day, 6 of us new people. And by the time I quit, I was one of the last 2. So, like, if you're not outperforming whoever you're next to when you start the job, they literally fire you within a month. Like, they waste no time. You know, the turnover at these sorts of places was pretty crazy. So I was good at it. I mean, that's the sad part. I was good at it. And it's funny because I think I practiced 2 things while I was there for esports. One was my speaking voice. I would purposely put on that, like, hello, can I interest you in any type of
it's
type
like
2 cartridge, ink black, whatever it was, you know,
the game show host, like, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen.
Like, I would kind of get off on people being like, I'm not going to buy your shitty products, but you have a nice voice. And if I heard that like 5 or 6 times in a day, I could go home smiling. And then the second thing was my autograph. You know, like I would just sit there on phone calls talking to people and just practice my signature, scrawny over. And I was thinking about esports because it was kind of overlapping.
You had the name Scrawny back then, so you were already practicing. That's one thing that I suck at because I don't get asked a whole lot to do an autograph.
Oh, me neither, man. But when it happens, Bach, I'm gonna be well prepared.
I think I've done maybe less than 25 total ever.
Right.
Usually people want pictures. We're not like celebrities. They want players to sign their mouse pad or their T-shirt. But sometimes you get that guy that's like, I want everyone to sign everything. So you're like, all right, like I'll sign this spoon that you brought with you to DreamHack, whatever. But every time I go up, I'm like, shoot. And I remember one time, this is DreamHack Austin. DreamHack Austin was the first time I'd ever hosted an event. And I was super excited. And my brain was rattled the final day because I accidentally said Optic was playing next. Optic got eliminated.
Right.
So
that's all you can think about.
And someone pointed it out to me. So then I said it 2 more times.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It was bad.
The pitfall, right?
But
you're stuck in the trap.
I finally like owned up to it in the grand finals or whatever it was when they weren't playing. I was like, I guess I'm the world's greatest Optic fan because I can't stop saying the word Optic even though they're not even in the tournament anymore. So I like made a joke out of it to like kind of laugh at it a little bit because I was so frustrated. But this kid came up to me. He's like, hey man, can you sign my jersey? I'm getting everyone to sign my jersey. I'm like, all right. So I go to sign it and I wrote BOG. I realized after the fact that I wrote the Q and I swooped it the wrong way. And I'm like, oh, no. I was like, this kid's got a Bog signature.
He's going to go home and be like, who the hell is Bog?
And he's going to look up his ESCA profile and be like, wow, that caster guy's pretty good because Bog used to be like a high-level main, like advanced player. He probably still plays, but I think he plays, it's 2 Gs, BOGG. But still, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I just screwed that up. But I mean, you talk about the whole practice thing. Like I worked in IT before and I would call people all the time and you get really good at working on cadence and like your pacing and kind of the way you use inflection on your voice when you're talking to people because you want people to understand that you're being kind even when you're telling them that the problem is their fault. So I'd be explaining to someone, hey, you're the one that broke this. But I got to be like, well, sometimes you don't really realize. And I'm like going up and down with my voice. So it's like, oh, wow, that was really pleasant. Thanks for calling me an idiot, but doing it in a nice way.
Yeah.
You do kind of build those skills over time. It's not something you can just learn or you're born with.
No, now, I think speaking is an incredible skill to like fine tune. A lot of people don't realize it because a lot of people don't need it. But the moment you start realizing that your voice and the way you speak and what you say has a lot of impact, a lot more impact than I think people realize is when you can really delve into the world of linguistics.
Yeah, I mean, that was something I always tried to focus on was the vocabulary. I always tried to build my vocabulary.
Sure.
And that was actually one of the few reasons I passed English in high school was because my senior year, my class was so stupid that he spent like 6 months working on grammar and vocab instead of literature. And I was like, hell yeah, because I hate literature. So I was like, my grades skyrocketed because I already understood grammar and way to speak, and I just naturally just latched onto that really easily. Now, let's jump into a time machine a bit. Before you got into the telemarketing thing, was that the prison?
Yes, the job before telemarketing was the prison. Yeah.
So, introduce us to that timeline in your life.
Sure, man.
Conner Girvan, CO.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is I never specify straight out the gates what I did because you got to leave people wondering, right? I remember seeing the look on my face, the look on the face of my current girlfriend's family. You know, one time I was at a family gathering and without thinking, I just mentioned like, well, back when I was in the prison. And her aunt just kind of like takes a step back. So yeah, I wasn't working as a corrections officer in the sense that like I wasn't the muscle, you know, I'm not a security. I'm already a pretty small guy. So I mean small, I'm like 6 foot, 160. I'm average. But I was smaller then. Like I mean, it's prison. 19, 20.
You're not the biggest guy in the prison.
I'm not the biggest guy in the yard, Buck. But I was hired as a supplies and services officer. So I worked in you're basically in charge of a giant inventory, and you're in charge of a team of like 8 to 10 inmates that all function inside basically like the laundry section of the prison. So they're responsible for let's say new arrivals come in. You know, a guy comes in, you got to give him t-shirts, you got to give him pants, socks, under. You know, you got to give all these items to people. But obviously, in a prison, everything's a commodity. So constantly you're working with, like, you know, you're also in charge of replenishing those items for prisoners that have been inside for years on end. You know, you can't give a guy 6 pairs of underwear when he walks in the prison and then 3 years later be working with the same shit. So there's tons of like inventory, stock, and upkeep, on top of also like all their hygiene products. Like you don't really think about how many items people need until they suddenly can't get them for themselves, right? So the gist of the job was I had to make sure people weren't stealing shit. I had to make sure people were not nude and dirty. And any type of laundry service that had to function within the prison, like let's say going to the detention hall where inmates were in isolation, taking all their bedding, doing all those sorts of things. Like, so you kind of worked with some pretty sketchy dudes, man. And this was like a medium security federal prison in Canada. So it's a Canadian prison. People always laugh at that, you know.
So
like,
people were really nice.
Yeah,
they'd come up to
that's
you.
what they say.
The
dude,
prisoners would come up and they'd be like, "Hey, buddy, it's a nice day, eh?"
Yeah,
I don't know what that accent was, but he comes up to you and he's like, "I think the Habs could actually win," and all of a sudden he's like, "All right, see you later, CO.
Yeah.
Enjoy it.
Yeah,
How's the family? I made you a
that's what
cup
a lot
of
of
coffee."
people might think it was, but it was very intimidating. I think it was, so again, being a smaller dude too. Like I remember the first day people tested me. Like that's what they have to do, right? And to remember as well, like my that's the reason I got in is because my dad works there, and he's pretty high up. So people already knew the last name, and you know my dad has a lot of enemies in jail as well because he's pretty strict. He's pretty by the book. Like he's in a role where he's got to take a lot of shit from inmates, and he deals with that very well. You know, he doesn't cave. Like there's some people who will go in there and then eventually, let's say you're tenured, this is your career, you're there for 20, 30 years. Like you start letting your guard down. You start befriending people. I mean, that's the reality of the situation.
I mean,
man.
you
These
spend
are
enough time with
beings.
these people. Yeah, you're bound to become friends with them. Did any of them? Well, how long were you at the prison?
I was at the prison for about 5-6 months.
So not too long, but long enough that you probably got to know some of these guys a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. Because I mean, there's two types, right? There was the guys who worked next to me. Literally, you know, every single morning they came in. I'm essentially their boss. You know, I'm their manager. I'm the floor manager. They've got a daily job to do, but it's within my section, so I've got to keep an eye on them. And you know, somebody walks through the door in the morning. What's your instinct, bro? You say hello. You know, it's hey, good morning. How are you doing? You know, they're having a coffee. You're having your coffee. It's like you are humans on a face to face. You're humans, man. And that was weird for me because I'm a very friendly guy. I'm a very positive person. You know, I like to think like I'm a good energy in a room. I like to laugh. I like to have fun. But that was an environment where I had to be way more serious. I had to put up a wall. And especially with inmates who I wasn't working with on a daily basis. You know, let's say Wednesdays, for example. Wednesdays at lunchtime was hygiene kit day. That means an inmate once a month on a Wednesday during the hours of 11 to 12 was able to come to the front door of my section, you know, hit the buzzer, come in and get a hygiene kit. Things like razors, shaving cream, soap, dental paste, denture cleaner, you know, whatever it was, anything hygiene related. But they can only come once a month. So all of a sudden you've got a queue of like 40 inmates through the door because everybody's trying to get their monthly supply of stuff. And, you know, you catch a guy who's trying to hit the line twice. He's trying to get more items because the moment he gets twice as many razors as he needs, he trades razors for sodas. He trades razors for whatever else he might want, right? Like everything is a freaking commodity.
Yeah, it's a currency.
Right. So then you tell him no. Well, then suddenly what? This 6'4", 250-pound man of muscle is gonna be told no, you can't have 3 razor blades by a 19-year-old like bag of bones. Come on, man! Like that's when you get confrontational, and like that's when you would have incidents.
Did anyone ever try to get you to do anything like sketchy, or did you even see anything sketchy, like maybe a CO doing something they shouldn't have done?
Sketchy stuff with other employees. I mean, you know what? Unfortunately, like I'll just be brutally honest. What do I care? Yeah, there's far more of an us versus them mentality with security versus inmates than somebody like me who's considered a civilian employee. You know, I'm not there to muscle anybody up. If I've got a problem, I hit my buzzer, a panic team comes to help me. And those are the guys who are going to throw an inmate on the ground, detain him, pepper spray him if they have to, you know, whatever it is. And so you start to get this us versus them type mentality. And on Fridays, we would have to go change the laundry in the detention hall. So obviously, if you're in detention, if you're in self-isolation, which is now illegal in Canada, by the way, we've taken that out of prisons because obviously one of the worst things you can do to a human
sort
is
of. Coronavirus has brought it back, but yeah.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's all the
rage. We're all self-isolating now. Canada's
yeah.
going to be rethinking that one.
Shit, man. How'd that turn around? But yeah, so like you got to go take all these, you got to take their bedding, their pillowcases, their towels, their face towels, anything they want to exchange in the week. You got to get it out of a detention cell, but they're being held in a 4x4 room. They're pissed off. They're in there because they probably have behavioral issues. And, you know, let's say Buddy wants to keep a face cloth. He wants to keep one extra face cloth. I'm not allowed to let him keep that. He has to give me everything or nothing. But like, again, how do you at the end of the day, if you're in the outside realm, it's like, you know, if your kid wants to dirty a face cloth, Buck, you're going to let him do it because it's it's a face cloth.
It's a face cloth. Who cares?
But in this instance, it's like it's a security risk because he can piss on that face cloth and then use it as, you know, some sort of a weapon afterwards, like a biological weapon if ever somebody's trying to mess. Dude, that's how you have to think. So yeah, you'd start getting guys who are really rowdy, people who will test your professionalism. They'll test your balls basically.
Did anyone ever straight up say to you like, I have a balloon, I need you to put it in your butt and bring it?
No, I was never approached. Okay. No. I made that pretty clear. I cracked down hard. I remember we got information. Sorry, the point of the whole detention thing was just to say that like COs sometimes, you know, like if a guy wasn't cooperating, you know, and I would say like, listen, I need that towel. Somebody go in there and get that towel. Well, then things would get a little unnecessarily physical. And then, you know, when it's a team of like 4 guards versus 1 prisoner, it's an unwinnable situation for him. And I saw unnecessary like physical use. They're not cops, and I think that, and this is kind of the joke, is like they're not police officers, but it's because they failed the test. Like, who would rather be a prison guard than a police officer?
They're like gym teachers with a baton.
Yeah, man. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's just, you know, people who don't have the appropriate professionalism and social skills to de-escalate a situation, which is something that I feel like that's where I would go towards as a non-physical person. That's not what I saw from other employees at times, and that was probably one of the more fucked up things was seeing people being abused. And
now, now I asked you if you had ever been approached about, you know, a balloon that you poop, and you didn't. But did anyone else? Did you ever see anyone try to like?
I never saw anybody do it, but it's definitely a problem.
Yeah.
I mean, think of it this way, right? A $10 pack of cigarettes on the outside goes for $100. Everything's 10 times the value.
And how do they get money? Do they trade it on like their commissary?
Right. So they have bank accounts. Basically, you know, like they earn daily wages if they're doing jobs, if they're working inside the prison. They can also have money transferred from the outside. So a lot of these guys, if they're gang affiliated, will just have, you know, money coming from the outside. It doesn't stop, you know, like we live, like all you need is one cell phone on the inside. You make a couple of phone calls and suddenly you have extra money, right?
What is the phone situation in Canada? Because some prisons actually allow prisoners to have cell phones in other countries. I'd imagine Canada probably more closely mirrors the U.S.
Yeah, same. There's not supposed to be any cell phones in there.
That's what I figured.
Yeah. So there, yeah, cell phones are illegal contraband. Anything that you can make lists on are technically contraband because you're not allowed to have lists. Yeah, because lists, the moment you have lists, you have inventory. And if you have inventory, it's because you're either keeping track of sales, you're keeping track of debts, you're keeping track of something, and you shouldn't be, right?
I never thought of that.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Now, when you're in there day one, they're going through the training and they're like, so this is your area. That big red button over there is in case someone tries to hurt you. what's like the thought going through your mind? Are you like, uh-huh? Or because, you have family that does this, you're like, you're like, I'm going to be fine. I'll be okay.
Well, I mean, I have family, but my dad's been in a couple of situations as well where like his physical health was at risk.
Jeez.
Yeah. He'd been like, he used to work in the kitchen, like the kitchen section. He was the head of the kitchen. And one time when he was walking around the floor, some guy who he had busted a couple of times for trying to steal stuff just took at like imagine like a cafeteria trolley, plates and whatever, very weighted, lots of stuff on it. As my dad was walking by, he got pinned against the wall by it. My dad's hand is down, and you're pinned against the wall. And when you say the big red button is like you have a beeper on your belt loop, and the moment you press that button, like a team of 7 or 8 people is coming to you within a couple of minutes, but you still have to survive that couple of minutes, right?
Yeah.
So I'd been warned, and you take it seriously. I mean, you don't walk in there like a first day at a new restaurant waiting tables or some shit. Like, I remember sitting in the car before I walked in the first day and just like deep breaths, remembering where I was, remembering that the moment I walked through the doors, you've got eyes on you. Like, first impressions mean everything. And that's even more so when you've got huge demographic of aggressive men, sizing you up. Like, it's a weird dynamic, dude. It was a really weird place, really weird time in my life. But yeah, I never felt unsafe. There was a couple of times where I was shook. I had trouble with a certain person specifically. A couple of times, verbal harassment, wouldn't give me his real name. So like, that's technically an offense. If I ask you what your name is, you've got to tell me so that I can write up reports. I can do whatever. I can punish that person.
Did he give you any good fake names?
No, he didn't actually. I can't remember what it was. Probably the most like generic of names. But I would work with like a plexiglass and like steel bar kind of window. I'm on the other side of it. Double lock doors, a door like a locked door to get into the, let's say, like lobby, the foyer.
Yeah.
And then another one to get into the actual laundry department. And I remember a couple of times like guys who would just like you're face to face through a plate, but then as you're kind of escalating the conversation, they just smash the glass with their hand, try to spook you, try to make you jump, just to kind of see, again, how ballsy you are, how
trying
far
to
you're willing to push it. Right. I mean, like the professional advice is always de-escalate the situation, never escalate it. But if some guy's standing there calling you all the names in the book, right? You skinny son of a bitch, you hopeless 20-year, like, whatever it is, like whatever the verbal.
I'm sure that was heavily downplayed. I'm sure they said a lot worse things than that.
All the time.
You stinky poop face.
Yeah, and so you have to, you got to size it up. Like, it takes a lot. It takes a lot not to start screaming profanities back, but that's exactly what they want. They want to chip that professionalism. So outside of that, I mean, the most intimidating time ever was. So imagine this. You've got cell blocks down in say one part of the compound, the prison compound, and you've got to walk to the cafeteria for lunch. Well, they do lunch in sections. So let's say, I'm just throwing numbers out. Let's say there's 150 inmates per building. They will unload those guys at a time. They'll all go eat. They'll get their food, whatever. They'll go back, and then they do it in waves, right? And it was a particularly busy day where I hadn't delivered, X amount of supplies, because any supply that comes from outside the prison lands in our section, and then we would bring that to the next one. So let's say the offices where the warden works, like she needs paper or envelopes or whatever it may have been. It's my job to get that there. But it's lunch hours, so I don't have any inmates. Normally I could say, here, take this, bring it here, go deliver it. Like, I was basically just managing people at that time.
Yeah.
But it's one of those situations where I've just got to do it myself. So I load a bunch of stuff onto a little chariot and I'm pushing it down the walkway. But then I was doing it at that time because I had free time, and I didn't realize that it was also at the same moment that I'd be literally walking down a straight corridor, me in one direction, and 150 prisoners walking the other direction. And there's nothing in between you. There's a foot of space, and then just a row of men, inmates, faces, guys you don't, and you think to yourself, like, if I've pissed anybody off, if my father's pissed anybody off, and like they're out to get you, like, because that's in the back of your head, like, is somebody out to get me?
Yeah.
You know, you don't even have time to recognize all the people, and you're not going to stand there and look at them. You know, this is kind of like a straightforward,
Yeah, it's like walking through New York City. You do not make eye contact.
No. So that was probably the most intimidating time, because I think like a couple of days earlier, I had a spat with a guy. I had reported him. He had gone to detention. So like, you know, he was in a pretty shitty position because of me following through with the punishment. Now he's got friends. He could be gang affiliated. You never know. So that was a weird one. That was when I felt the most scared. And I think that was actually a couple of weeks before I finished the job there too. So I remember when I remember after that, I kind of, my mentality kind of shifted to like, fuck, thank God there's only 2 more weeks, you know?
Yeah. That's like a full pucker moment.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, man.
Like you're fully puckered up. You're like,
because again, like,
oh my God.
You push a panic button. Yeah, there are people coming to save you, and they will save you. That's their job. Like they're good at their job. It's a good response. Like but for that time in between, right? You are fending yourself. You're fending for yourself. And even though it never happened, and it very rarely happens, like that's the thing too. Like I'm not trying to paint a doomsday. Like no, the whole time I was there was never any physical altercations other than like having to subdue some people, and that's all correctional office stuff. That's not civilian.
Yeah. I mean, I could imagine you putting somebody in like a nice chokehold.
Yeah, man. People underestimate me, but
yeah,
that's my forte. It's all about the chokes.
Now, when you transitioned away from these things, actually before you transitioned away, when you were in these prisons, was there anyone in there like life sentence, like they were like never getting out of prison? So there was guys who were like, I got nothing to lose.
Absolutely, yeah, murderers.
Jesus.
Yeah. Or
that's
I mean,
terrifying.
So it's a medium security, right? So like, let's say somebody.
How is a murderer medium security? This guy killed somebody else.
Let's say he's 10 years in. Let's say he goes to a maximum security prison.
Good point.
Sentenced that way, but then it's a good behavior thing, right? Yeah, you get guys like that. Like let's say some 60-year-old guy who has another 20 years to serve thinks to himself, like, even if you imagine getting out of prison at 60, bro. Your friends are so far advanced in terms of like their social economic standing in life and
you've gone backwards,
right, dude?
Because if anything, like, you come out at 60 and it's harder than it was when you were 20.
That's what I mean. It's such a, that to me was where my mentality was a lot of the time during that job, was that like I felt bad for a lot of guys, man. You know, you get caught up at 25 in some kind of drug crime. You know, let's say you're selling weed, lots and lots of weed. Yeah, it's illegal, but all of a sudden, okay, you're 5 years behind. You get out of prison, all of your friends have kind of moved on. 5 years. If you didn't talk to somebody for 5 years, like, odds are they're not intimately intertwined to your life anymore. So you're just behind, and you see that. And then what's the easiest way to catch up? Do more crime.
Yeah.
But then it's a second offense. So yeah, I the people you worry about are the guys who know they're never going to get out, or don't want to get out. The amount of people who are released at these later ages, right, and then just wind up back in jail a month or two later, it's depressing. Repeat criminals are a vast majority. I'm not making up stats, but like repeat criminals are far too frequent. So you think to yourself, like, what if that guy has a debt? What if he has to pay up to his debt? And that involves attacking somebody. Like, he's not going to get out anyways. The worst punishment you can do is send him to maximum security. So, right? You try to avoid those sorts of.
It's called what is it? Anti-recidivism. That's like the terminology that prisons are trying to get into now, because recidivism is how prisoners are lapsing back into crime at a ridiculous rate, because the reality is they can't get back into normal life the way that everybody else does. I mean, just looking at my own personal experiences from age 20 to 30, my salary increased 4 times what I made when I was 20. So by the time I was 30, I was making 4 times the amount of money I was when I was 20. And I think that's usually normal. A lot of people double or even triple that salary. Some people are in college, so the numbers get a little bit skewed. But regardless, like, you should see the most significant growth in your life between like ages 20 and 35. So there are guys who spend that time in prison, and then they get out, and
Yep.
it's just like, what do I do now? Because I'm starting at 36, where someone would start when they were 17. Except I also have this black mark on my permanent record that says, like, I went to prison, and then it makes it even harder for them to do anything. Now, getting away from your past and getting into the present.
Yeah, man, you've taken me back to a dark time. Let's get
you
out
know
of here.
what? I like hearing this story, though. That's like the whole idea, is like getting back into what made Conner Girvan scrawny.
Yeah.
Which is a name history we'll get into one day. But what was the first moment in your casting career when you were kind of like, I think I could actually do this? Like that aha moment where you're like, I think this could be my full-time job.
I would kind of say early on, and not because I thought that I would be casting big events, but because I was willing to. And I remember a time thinking to myself, like, I will live with my parents for the rest of my life and earn, less than minimum wage, if it means that I can cast Counter-Strike for the majority of my time. Like that's how I framed it in my mind, was like, it could take 5 years, it could take 6 years, it doesn't matter to me. I was just fully focused on casting as much as I could, getting as good at casting as I possibly could, and just fuck everything else in my surroundings that would hold me back from casting. Like, if I had my aspirations weren't like home ownership or being rich or having a snazzy car. My aspirations were fully, I just want to cast Counter-Strike, and I want to live a life that allows me to cast Counter-Strike.
I gotta say, that's one thing that I think people probably don't understand about life in general, is that it doesn't matter how much money you make or how big the house you have is or how nice your car is. That'll bring some people joy, but for most of us, it's just about doing what we love. And I've had that moment at various points over the last 5 years as I've slowly worked my way into the esports scene as a full-time career. I was like, man, I would love to just quit my job. And I had a good job. I was working full-time in IT. They would let me take off time more than my vacation days and sick days to go do events because they supported it. They'd tell our customers, like, oh, yeah, look, you can check them out here, and they'd send the link out. They really supported my rise in through the esports world.
Right.
But even still, I was like, man, it'd be great if this was just all I did. And even now, I work in the background of esports, and I do really love my job, and I've got a great job. But even still, I'm like, man, it would be cool if it was just the casting work, because there's so much freedom in that. Because it's like, I just do this one thing, and I control my schedule, and I can do whatever I want when I'm not working, because that's just what my life is. And there's joy in doing what you love, and then there's joy in doing what you love when you want to do it.
Yep. And I think that's a lesson I learned by having these other jobs. Like, I think it's, you asked me today about what I did before, but there's a lot of guys in Counter-Strike who are casting at the top, or just, talent in the top, that have had some pretty shitty jobs beforehand. Mohan used to be a butcher. Mohan used to work retail. Chad used to dig ditches. Like, it's a part of, I think, pursuing something that you love to do. You understand the value of that if you've had to spend your time doing jobs you don't like. And I mean, that's not the case for everybody. Some of the younger guys, this is going to be their one and only. And they're lucky, and they know they're lucky. I think like Harry and Hugo, like their world is Counter-Strike, man. Harry and Hugo's world is Counter-Strike, and it's always been Counter-Strike, and that's what's great for them, is that, like, in their mind, there is no other reality. There is no alternative. This is it.
It's like Obo or Sam or these young players. Exactly. You look at them and like, this is all they know. This is all they've ever done.
They've come into a time where, they didn't, it was, I don't want to say set up for them, because they're hardworking too. And there's a reason that they are where they are. But like, even in my case, like, I didn't have to do the hardest of work to get here either, in the sense that, like, esports kind of existed when I learned what it was. Like, I watched Counter-Strike from like 2014, 2015. Been around way longer than that. So, so be it whatever it may be, point being is that like you know, I put time and effort into other jobs, and like at least with the prison, I felt like you know, you felt like you were doing some good. My intention there was to get into social rehabilitation, and that's like where it tied in with academics. Is like I didn't want to work in the laundry department, but that was just a great way to show I was a hard worker, make the proper contacts, etc. All the same things that I have to do in casting as well, you know, making contacts, putting in the effort at the lower levels. And so once you kind of have that appreciation, I think that's what fueled me to jump all in on esports and just realize that like, if I can make this work, then it will be worth it. So I would sacrifice anything else.
So
I think
you know,
you were there too.
yeah, I mean, you say like there was no aha moment. There was no moment where we were like, oh man, like this could actually work. But was there a moment when you were like, this is 100% what I want to do? Was it an event? Was it something online? Or was it just like, I love watching this and this is what I want to do? Because I've dealt with doing not auditions myself, but I handled auditions when I worked at ESEA, doing stuff for the Next Big Caster Challenge, and a lot of the people that entered had no casting experience. All they'd ever done was watched a tournament, and they were like, I want to do this.
I want to do that, yeah.
Like, my journey was different. Mine was more like yours. It started off as shtick. I was just streaming it for fun, and then it turned into a real thing. I didn't necessarily start and go, this is 100% what I want to do. I knew I wanted to work in esports. I had an IT background. I figured I'd be fixing computers, setting up servers, working as a stage admin. I didn't think I'd be on camera, backstage, talking about the game at all, especially as someone who won't even watch this video back because I hate how I both look and sound on camera. It is like a massive aversion.
Yeah.
I'm like that actor who is in Star Wars who cannot watch any of himself because it freaks him out. I just don't like it. But for you, was there that moment when you're like, this is 100% what I want to do, hands down?
Yes, and if I had to like try and pinpoint it, it's a bit difficult, but I would throw it around my first DreamHack Open, I think. DreamHack Valencia 2017, I think. 2017 or 18.
That sounds, I think it was probably 17.
Yeah. That was when, because I mean the Fragadelphia events was like, that's what I had done beforehand. Like if I try off the top of my head, I feel like Fragadelphia was my first LAN event ever. I didn't even know what a LAN event was, like in terms of like Counter-Strike. Showing up at Frag was awesome. There was just suddenly tons of gamers around. But it was also a lot of like hard work in the sense that, you know, I remember being shirtless on the sidewalk of Philadelphia, spray painting panels to put up behind us in the casting section.
I forgot about that.
Yeah,
oh my gosh, that was that event.
Yes, yeah, there was tons of stuff. So like, you know, Frag was real manual work. Like, you know, we had to move so many damn chairs. We had to set up that venue the day before. I remember driving in a you know, the last Frag I did, rest in pieces. I remember driving across Philadelphia in a big white truck with Topical, just moving things all day long, just hours of back and forth, moving the studio to the big venue we had rented. So like back then, it didn't seem like I was just a caster. It just felt like I was putting in effort because everybody was, when it came to Frag, like everybody had to work hard to pull that event off. It was very grassroots and it felt good. You felt that sense of accomplishment again.
You
not
feel
from
ownership.
The casting. Yeah, you feel ownership, man. And I had no stake in it. Like it wasn't profitable. Maybe you get some free stuff. Like it wasn't technically, in terms of like hours to income, it was not worth my time, but I wouldn't have changed anything about it, and I would go back and do it 100 times over again.
That's the first beauty time of that system.
Like, yeah,
the grassroots system is like people start to feel like it's theirs, and that's not just for the people involved. That's also for the people who are attending the event. Like even the players themselves feel like the event is theirs. The grassroots LAN scene in general, across all esports, not specific to any one event. It's all about everyone collectively building something together. And when I worked in construction, I remember one of the things I always loved was being able to step back and see what I built. So we would spend weeks building a deck, and at the end I'd go, wow, we built that. That is so awesome. That shit. Yeah. So like now I do the same thing with events. When we do an event and I look back, I'm like, wow, like I wasn't just some dude who showed up and got a big fat paycheck to talk on camera. I was like loading out the stage and loading up trucks and laying lines and slapping down converter boxes and running some of the production elements. Like, there was more of a sense of ownership. There's pride in that ownership. So when something goes well and it's successful, it's a great feeling. And you want to just keep doing it forever.
You do. And I think that, like, in terms of taking that next step into like casting specifically and thinking to myself, like, I want to do this forever, was, again, like I said, the first DreamHack Open, because that was the first, Frag is a LAN event in the sense that there's competition and there's X amount of computers. But DreamHack is a festival. It's an esports festival. And it feels like, obviously with the scale of their events, and like, if anybody who's watching this who's never been to a DreamHack, who's never been to like these sorts of esports festivals, you just got to go. Because once you've been in those environments, once you've been surrounded by just nothing but gamers, you realize, like, there's a lot of power in this community. There's a lot of us. And if you're a super competitive player and you want to participate in their BYOC tournaments, then like you can go there and you can feel that. Backpedal, there's an event in Montreal called Lan ETS.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Lan ETS.
Yeah. Put on by the École Technologie Supérieure, something like that. Like, it's, I don't know.
You said it better than I could.
Right. It's our, like, it's a tech school. It's a branch of one of the universities, I'm pretty sure. But what's important is that that they have a big BYOC, like a 2,000 person BYOC. And I started competing there in Counter-Strike tournaments for the Concordia University in Montreal. So like, my first LAN event was actually playing with a collegiate team. And that's where I first kind of, like, you're staring at your screen just like you would in your basement playing MM with your friends. But then when you push your chair back and look around, you're just surrounded by thousands of gamers.
Oh, it's huge. LAN ETS is big.
And there's just like, there's sick light shows everywhere and there's music in the background. And it's like, you're doing the same activity you've done for countless amounts of hours on your own, but you're suddenly a part of this larger community. And it doesn't matter if everybody's playing the same game. It's just, you're all there being greasy, sweaty nerds for an entire weekend, and it's fucking awesome. So
I mean, my first LAN event was the GXL 512. This was in 2005. So
okay,
I'm dating myself a little bit. This was 15 years ago. I went to my first LAN. I had a full-size 19-inch CRT monitor and a full tower PC. It took like a small village to just get everyone's computers in there set up and ready to go. But it was awesome because it was like one of the first experiences with that. And the 512 stood for the amount of people that they could possibly accommodate. It actually ended up being closer to 700 from what I understand, which at the time was like, what is this? It was at a rescue center in Millville, New Jersey. And it was awesome. NVIDIA showed up and AMD showed up and Intel showed up and there's like booths everywhere and there's a stage and they're doing a wing eating contest. And I remember so many vivid details about that event because it was the first event I'd ever been to like that. It wasn't even my first LAN. My first real LAN, I think I was 13. My mom drove me 5 hours into Pennsylvania. Me and my friend Nate went into 5 hours into Pennsylvania and got dropped off at a church with a bunch of strangers for a Quake 3 LAN called Telefragged. It was a small LAN, no cash prize. I think we paid like $20 just to enter. And it was like 48 hours of just nonstop gaming. And like that was like 30, maybe 40 people in a church basement. So this was like a totally different experience. But like all of those like early LANs that you go to, like everything is so vivid because of the fact that it was such a cool experience. Like I remember us at 11 o'clock we're starving because we didn't really bring any food with us. We only had like $30 in our pockets. So the guys that were running the event were college students. They're like, let's go. We'll drive you guys to Wendy's. And we're like, sick. Awesome. Sounds good. And I remember walking outside and seeing the car that was going to drive us. And it was this banged up minivan, like dents on every corner. And then I see the guy who's going to drive us. And he doesn't inspire confidence with the way that he walks.
All right.
With the ability that he would have to drive. I'm looking at him like, oh no. I was like, this guy's going to be the one driving us. I'm worried.
Yeah, and we might die.
Yeah, I think at one point he may have scraped the little yellow pillars they put outside of the drive-thru windows to keep you from running into it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he rubbed that with his minivan. I remember that. I remember You know, the GXL 512, they did a wing eating contest, and there was a man who had an arm that had not fully developed. And I remember him eating wings with it. And like, I'm like 16, 17 years old.
Yeah.
I'm like trying so hard not to laugh because I'm just some asshole like teenager. And he's got a long Fu Manchu mustache, like 6 inches off his face, and it's covered in wing sauce. I'm like, this is like a caricature.
Is this real?
Like, they did a race around the building, and then they were like, all right, another lap. Whoever wins gets a graphics card, but you have to do it in your underwear. And then they stole everyone's clothes and locked the door, and it's February, and like they're freezing cold outside. Like, I remember all of these details because the LAN experience is so cool. So I echo what you're saying. If you've never been to a LAN event, whether it's a DreamHack or just some local LAN event in your area or a Nerd Street Gamers National Championship Series LAN event, I highly recommend that you go to one, which,
I second those.
As of right now, dates TBD because obviously LANs everywhere have been shut down. Man. Yeah, I know. It's kind of a bummer, right?
Yeah. Still, now, I mean, it's moments like this where like we've talked about other things for long enough for me to forget the global situation we're in.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, and I think that's the power of doing stuff with this. That's why I think it's a really good time to have a big old conversation with you, Bach, because it's like, take me to a time before.
Yeah,
take me back.
I mean, it's got to be scary for you. You're a full-time freelancer, correct? You don't have a full-time job, so this is your primary source of income. So it's got to be a little stressful.
Yeah, luckily I had time off now anyways. Like there was just with Flashpoint and ESL Pro League going on and not having been hired for either of the two, it's like I understood that I had free time put aside. And that was one of the benefits, you know. It's not weird to me that I'm not working right now. It's weird to me that nobody else is either.
Yeah, right.
You know, I'm used to having time off. It's one of the benefits of this. And we've kind of carved out a schedule, most, you know, a pretty solid schedule for the year, Launders and I. Thanks to the companies we do work for, like we had a good sense of when and where we would or would not be working. So it's not too problematic for me now. I think June was where I was being, you know, supposed to be getting back on the road.
Gonna go check HLTV. Hold on 1 second.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Blast and DreamHack, right? We're regular faces now.
Yeah,
Blast
exactly.
and DreamHack.
So you didn't lose any gigs necessarily.
Not yet.
No, not yet. There's a fear. I mean, there's a fear that this could go on for longer, and obviously that starts to become a concern. But you haven't lost anything yet.
No, and I mean, I don't know what either of those companies plan on doing with their events. I'm again, like I'm a freelancer. Like we have conversations with them, but I'm not intimately, you know, intertwined with their decision making. But I'm still hopeful that, like, you know, maybe Counter-Strike just goes to a place where we can play online for a while. I can commentate from home. Or who knows, you know, if the events get canceled, it's not the end of the world. I'm blessed to be Canadian, where our government's doing a great job of dealing with this kind of stuff. The relief for even freelancers and self-employed people is there. So if I miss events, I'm just sad that I miss events and that I don't get to see those people. I don't get to travel. I don't get to live through all the privileges that come with this job. But there are people in worse situations. So I'm not gonna pity myself here.
Now,
I'm still fine.
Looking at your career in general, what would you say was like the defining moment? Like what so far has been the peak? Because I mean, for me, I personally loved when we got to do DreamHack Rio, because Brazil was just like a totally different experience. I'm like, man, these fans are wild. Up until that point, it was like iBuy Masters 2016, because that was one of the few live audience events that I had worked. So I'd imagine it's probably something like that. Is there one event that stands out that you were just like, oh my God, this is amazing? Yeah,
I would say it comes in two waves. It's a repeating event, luckily for us. We've done it twice, but to me personally, it's been Blast Copenhagen. Blast Copenhagen 2018, we had gotten in with Blast earlier in the year. We had done Istanbul and whatever the second event was before Copenhagen. But the point being, you know, we did all three of the Blasts that year. And the coolest thing about Blast at the time, you know, the format wasn't the best. The 3 ongoing matches wasn't the best. But what was really sick was that when we were in a country that spoke enough English, that the commentators for the mainstream would be on the tip of the stage. So you were literally at the point of the stage that was closest to the crowd. And we were in the Copenhagen Royal Arena. there was like 12,000 fans. And you weren't
That's
in some
amazing.
back room underneath, underneath the bleachers casting from like when we did in Istanbul, where they had the Turkish commentators at the front of the stage, and we were elsewhere. We were still there for the English broadcast, but you didn't melt into the crowd and kind of ride that energy.
Yeah, I mean, DreamHack's kind of like that too. Like you're backstage, you don't really get that interaction. Like Rio would have been insane if the casters were out, because there was like, even though there was only like maybe 1,000, maybe 1,200 people there tops.
So loud.
It was so insanely loud, louder than anything
Yeah.
I've ever heard before, louder than the Boston Major, which had 10,000 people at it, which I got to attend as a spectator. It was loud. But yeah, like there's like that element that gets lost if you're not a part of the crowd, and it amps you up. It like fuels you almost.
100%, man. That's when I realized like there's levels to casting that aren't accessible until you are in certain situations. Like you rise, like you're a product of your environment in that way. Like the first step I would say is like when I went to my DreamHack Open for the first time, and suddenly you've got like an 8-man, if not more, there's probably way more people than I even realized, doing stream production for a DreamHack Open, right? You've got a producer in your ear, you've got a team of people on their computers, you've got replays, you've got whatever. It's not just Mr. Kim being a solo stream producer at Philadelphia, right? It's like, and bless his soul, he did a great job and he did a lot of work for one man. But the moment there are more people, you suddenly find yourself in an environment where you can cast better because you're not worried about things like countdowns and ad break. It's like, it's so the larger picture is so clear that you perform to your environment and you can just do a better job because of that. And then the next one, so you go from like grassroots to like professional production, and then the step up from there is live audience. When you have crowds, when you're in stadium, your natural levels of excitement can never, I could try and commentate from this basement here, bro, but it's never going to be the same as if I was standing in a crowd of 12,000 people. I can promise you that. I'll scream my lungs out and it fits the moment because the rest of the crowd is also hyped like that.
Yeah, I mean, I got to be honest. After doing in-person events, I really lost my desire to ever do online work again.
Oh, dude, it's a drug, man. It's I remember this year walking off of the stage with Mohan, Blast Copenhagen 2018. We got to do the grand finals. Wow. Like we walked off the stage and we just walked back. The confetti had fallen on us. We had the big epic moment. Again, like you're in the middle of it. And then we just went back into the locker room section, like the underneath the bleachers, and I just looked at him and I was like, "It's a hell of a drug, Mohan." And that, I know that resonates with him. He's quoted me a couple times on that because it's like that was one of those times where the two of us, we have an intimate connection, obviously. Like we're doing the same job, we depend on each other. So like that was one of those moments that will sit with me for the rest of my life. And it fuels my commentary when, you're having a slow day. You're not feeling the game. Maybe it's two teams you're not too interested in. Maybe it's at a caliber of event that is now like, like you said, like you don't want to go return to online events. Well, unfortunately, sometimes like now, I'm sure like if I picked up a grassroots event, am I going to walk into there and be as gung-ho as I am about casting in front of massive audiences? Like you can't lose that, and I don't want to lose that, but it naturally starts to deplete itself because it's not the same dopamine hit. It's literally a drug. Like these new highs, all of a sudden, it's like, I don't need your bush weed. Like I've got crack cocaine of Counter-Strike now. But you can't let it slide.
Yeah, I remember, even actually getting emotional at one point in my career.
Yeah, man. Okay.
Because after I did an event, I think it was the iBuyPower Masters I did at the hangar in Orange County Fairgrounds. I think it was 2016. After I did it, I remember like being back at the hotel and seeing some tweets come through from people who were like higher up in the scene. I'm like, they're like giving me credit. I remember the two people that got credit that weekend, because that was the weekend of Northern Arena as well in Toronto.
Yes, Northern Arena, Montreal.
Montreal, that's right. Yep. And I remember seeing some tweets that went out that had my name and Launder's name, and they were like, two people that did awesome this weekend. Want to see more of Bach and want to see more of Launders. I was like, wow. That felt so good. And I remember the reaction of just like the crowd like responding. There's something cool about It's one thing when you're just casting and you hear the crowd. It's another thing when you actually hear the crowd responding to the things you say. Like you're like trying to get them fired up and you hear it. You're like, oh my God, like I control these people. This is so cool.
Yeah,
And
they're
it's just a
listening to you.
completely different experience. It really does make you not want to do anything else ever again. Like studio events will never feel the same. Low crowd events or crowdless events just don't matter. Online Counter-Strike is just going to feel so much different and more hollow. And in fact, I've noticed, even though I don't cast as much anymore and I've transitioned more into hosting, when I do cast online stuff, I feel like I kind of just do what we're doing right now. Kind of just like have a conversation with my co-caster, like talk about the game, but also just talk about life, because it's hard to actually cast that because it just feels like it's not as interesting to me as it once was. When I first started, I would put everything into those online broadcasts, but now it's just it's hard to do that. Now, is there a goal besides casting a major, which I think anyone who works in the industry wants to do? Is there a goal for you that's up like right now that you're trying to reach for?
I mean, casting major is obviously always on the docket, like you said. That's a given, man.
Anyone who says otherwise is lying. Even though I myself have said I don't care if I never cast a major, I'm lying. I want to cast a major. Come on now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I mirror your sentiment where it's like, if I never cast a major, I'm not going to think any less of myself, because I've come to the point where I realize that, like, you know, it depends on companies too. Some companies just don't hire us. So if they get majors, then I'm not going to cast a major. That doesn't mean I can't be a great commentator. I think that's my goal. That's just what I strive for first and foremost. And it's independent of Launders as well. It's not saying like we need to become an amazing duo. It's just I, as myself, want to be remembered as one of the best commentators in Counter-Strike. And I'm not there yet. I've improved. I go back and watch my old casts. I've improved incredibly, but I still have flaws, and I know what they are. And until I stamp those out and kind of like keep perfecting this, I'm not going to feel that sense of accomplishment. And even casting a major is not going to fix that either. It's like casting a major would be a great milestone. I would think to myself like, fuck, look how far I've come from a Fragadelphia to a major is an incredible transition. And like, I'm not going to rob myself of that accomplishment, but it wouldn't be enough to think that, like, you know, I've left an impression on Counter. I think that's what I want to do. I want to leave an impression on Counter-Strike. I want my snacks in the Big Apple moment. I want a line of CS that will, you know, because I can go back, dude. When I watch like these the Vital CS:GO rewind videos, you said it before, right? Like, you get emotional, dude. I cry all the time because of Counter-Strike. I cry before grand finals, like because I take those moments to self-reflect, and I just think to myself, like, you know, it's been my emotion and ambition and drive that have put me in the positions that I've been given, and luck, and also, you know, the graciousness of certain tournament organizers. Like, one person could be an incredible caster. It doesn't mean you're gonna get the opportunities you hope for. So by whatever string of random events, Buck, that have unfolded while we fly around on this rock, like, I use that emotional reaction to fuel myself, and so I think what would really fire me up would be to have one of these like great lines.
Oh man, I mean, I remember going back to 2016 or 2015. I think it was 2016. There was a video that was made that went really popular on Reddit. It's got millions of views. It was CS:GO where Amazing happens, and there's all these crazy plays at the time that had been built up by casters. And I remember seeing this clip start, and I'm like, no way. That's like, me. I casted this, and it was so early on in my career.
Catwalk?
No, it was it was on Cash. It was Valen's 1v5ing a Ninja defuse at around 30. It's 15-14. I think they were playing Area 51, so Summit's team. Yeah. And he's running up highway, a 1v5. There's a smoke down. He just throws a flash high up into the air and runs through the site blind and just sticks the bomb. And they're all on the site, and no one knows that he's on the bomb. And he literally defuses the bomb just in time for Summit to fall off and watch him get the last second on the defuse. He was on top of Red Box. And it was really early on in my career. And even as I listen back to him, like, oh my God, you suck at this. Why do people pay you money? You are so bad. But I'm listening to him like, but this is so cool. I was like, that's my voice. That is so wild to me that, like, that is me. It was one of those moments where I too was like, this is awesome. I don't have like a famous quip. I don't have like a famous quote from the game, like Snacks in the Big Apple and he's going to take a bite. I don't have anything like those, and he's hungry or whatever the heck the line is. I always forget it. But I don't have any of those like really famous lines, the man, the myth, the beast. Those are like standout moments in Counter-Strike. But that one moment, just that one video or from early on in my career, that sort of like satiated that for me. I was kind of like, that's cool. So I definitely like kind of echo that. Like getting that moment is so cool.
It's and the thing with moments like that is you never know when they're going to come. Yeah, and exactly. I think that's why commentary as a job has this. You get this incredible sense of FOMO. If you're missing an event, then it means you're not commentating it. And if you're not commentating that event and it's the event where somebody pulls off a play of the year or a play of the decade, it's like you didn't get your chance to cast that. It's got to be a perfect storm. You have to have an incredible moment in game and you have to have an incredible moment on the mic. And, some fall flat. Like personally, I remember even as recent as like Blast Premiere in London. It's the last event we did. RPK, a bomb site on Inferno. He gets 3 1-deags out of nowhere, one after another, clutches the round. Pretty high pressure moment, pretty important round as well. It was like an eco. So it just like it swung the momentum of the game. But I remember in that moment being unprepared for it. So the reaction is just it's literally just guttural sounds. Oh, like increasing because and I mean, it's not, I didn't think it was bad per se, but it's like, that was one of those moments where if I had something up the sleeve, if I didn't have my guard down, or if I had been thinking to myself, he can win this, then I could have set it up to be one of those moments, right? Like Semler's happy deagle on Inferno, a B site. Like, yeah. But all it takes is that momentary lapse in focus or that just moment of unpreparedness to kind of undermine your chances at it, right? So
I mean that's the wild thing. People don't realize, like, we're writing the script as we go. Like that's the job of a commentator, is to literally write the script as you go. So you're thinking 3 to 4 words ahead of what you're saying out loud, because you're forming sentences and phrases in your mind. So making those specific moments happen means you either preloaded that quote, like you were ready to say it and you were just waiting for an opportunity, or you just really clicked with where your mind was going and it just came out perfectly, which I'd like to believe it's actually the latter. A lot of casters, I don't think, preload lines. Like they're not waiting for an opportunity to say it. There might be jokes you have in your mind. Like I kind of unleashed a pretty nasty joke at DreamHack Atlanta. We were casting VP and they were playing against, I don't even remember who. They were pushing, it was, Snacks was on Ramp Room, and he's pushing towards Trophy. So Blue is casting, and Blue says, oh, Snacks moving up closer to the trophy room. And then he got quiet, and I said, that's the closest he's been to a trophy in a long time. And instantly I could see everyone in production that follows Counter-Strike like, like laughing, but also like, man, that's a rough blow. And Blue just goes, dude, he's still playing. Like, you don't have to do him like that. I'm like, I just couldn't help myself. And I was like, if he ever hears that, he's probably not going to like me, because I basically just said, this guy can't win. But the truth is, at the time, he wasn't really winning anything. So it was an accurate statement. But at the same point in time, it was like one of those things, like, my mind just clicked with this joke. I didn't have this preloaded. It just clicked. I was like, oh, this is the perfect time to just unleash this joke. And then afterwards, I was like, it was a bad time. You shouldn't have said that. That guy's going to hate you now. All the Polish fans are going to come after you. Nothing ever happened, but the idea was simple. Like, I shouldn't have gone that hard on this guy. But there are going to be times when we say things we wish we said differently. Like that Valence clip, all I'm saying is, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I literally said, oh my God, like 7 times in a row. I'm like, dude, you suck at this. That's why I look back. I'm like, you were really bad when you first started. But I think that's just the nature. Like sometimes something so unexpected occurs that you don't even have words to describe it in the moment, outside of like, like you just start making noises. You're like,
And the thing is, that's a natural reaction as well, right? Like one of my all-time favorite casting moments that I think flies under the radar for a lot of people is Dust on, I believe it was the Asia minor. He was casting with Vince. It was a game where Nifty was playing for Renegades still on Cash. He's like heaven ramp towards B site, and he just gets this crazy wall bang into Z from B ramp. Like, I didn't even know you could wall bang that position.
I know the play you're talking about.
And Dust's reaction is just like hysterical laughter. And I know he doesn't like it because, again, he in his mind as a caster is thinking like, I could have said this, I could have done this. And that's the nature of our job, is like we are self-critical people. I've never met a caster that's not self-critical. At least not any good ones. And and it's like, to him, he might not like that moment, but to me, I love it because it is the most especially being friends with Dust and like playing games with Dust. I know that is the most genuine Dust reaction in the world, and I love it. And okay, it might not sound the best, like the mics probably peak and it's just, but that is a hysterical moment, and it doesn't make sense. And that's why I love like the casting combination, right? And that's why I always think too, like, okay, you've got to be critical of yourself, and you've got to always go back and watch your games, and you got to identify your mistakes and your flaws and your weaknesses, because they change. My weaknesses now are not what they were when I started. When I started casting, I had the most repetitive rhythm, and you told me that. You're the guy who pointed that out. I would always cast like this. Yeah, every time. So like, and I fixed that. Like, now I've got a sick flow, and I remember to stop.
Yeah, you do.
And then pause. And then bring it back in really quick. You start to play with your rhythm and your cadence and whatever. But I have new flaws, and if I stop watching back my games, I'm not gonna know what these new flaws are.
Yeah, so, I mean, predictable speech patterns are actually a really big problem for aspiring casters, and it's one thing as I have listened to more and more aspiring casters over the years. Doing the Next Big Caster Challenge when I was working for ESEA, I would listen to like maybe 100 applications every time we did it. So I listened to probably like 500 or 600 clips of various casters, and I would hear guys, I'm like, this guy's got a golden voice, or this guy's got a terrible voice but he's got great cadence, or this guy's got great vocabulary but he has no idea how to use it. But one of the things they always struggled with was speech rhythms or speech patterns. Saying gets the opening kill, gets the opening frag, like the same thing every single time. And I do remember that early in your career listening to you cast, and I was like, bum 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 bum. And I remember I was like, hey, this is the one thing. It truly was the only thing I noticed was that, because you were already very, I wouldn't say established, but you knew what you were doing. You were very gifted very early on. So that was like the one thing I was like, if you had to fix anything, that's the only thing I'd fix. And other people might not have even noticed it, but I noticed it just because I'm also working in the same industry.
Yeah, you're also a caster, man.
But I've heard a lot of people that they just cannot escape those rhythms and those patterns, no matter how many times you tell them. So,
it's hard.
Even though I pointed it out to you, I give you credit for being able to fix it, because it is a really hard thing to change. Like, that's how you talk.
Took time. Yeah. I mean, I think it's because a lot of people, the first thing you want to focus on if you want to start casting is like the sound, because that's the first, you focus on your voice, and you focus on the way you speak and the clarity of your voice and the clarity of your pronunciation. And it's like, so that's why people start falling into this, like, I would say like this, it's a false type of speaking. It's artificial, they put on that radio voice. Yeah, exactly. It's performance. It's far more performance, because the thing is too, is that it's unnatural, especially if you start casting and it's not your job and it's not what you're used to. When you suddenly go from, let's say at the time, like, let's say you work a cash register at a grocery store. The amount of times that you're going to talk to somebody during the day and the way you speak to them, it's just your normal speech. So the moment you put a microphone in front of yourself and you're speaking over an activity in a game, it's like, it's a moment of performance. You have to perform, especially with a webcam on. It's like people feel that pressure. There's an audience. So you become artificial. And I think that's one thing more experienced casters will pick out immediately is your level of performance. How fake are you being? Not to say you're a fake person, but how fake are you speaking? Because one of the hardest things to do is to just take all of those skills that make a good caster, cadence, rhythm, vocabulary, and then put that in a normal speaking voice like this. If you can cast a game of Counter-Strike like a conversation, that's something Mohan tries to hammer home with me, because I still do that level of performance. I still have it. And he's the exact opposite. He comes from a very, different train of thought where it's like laid back, it's relaxed, it's conversation, and he draws me into that world, which helps me a lot.
But I also think it's good to have that
up.
dynamic. Like, I think it's good that you have that dynamic with Launders, because you might bring in more of that energy, whereas Launders might be a little bit more laid back. And independently of one another, if you were to cast with somebody else, it might be too hype. Like, there might be too much energy.
100%.
And with Mohan, it might be too relaxed. So together, you guys bring synergy and duality to the broadcast that gives you both sides of the coin. So it's like, hey, during downtime, we can chill and kick it and talk about whatever. There's not much happening in the round. And then when something hype happens, it's like, flip the switch. It's time for Scrawny to shine. And you can start hammering that stuff home. And that's actually something I've noticed. He pulls you into the relax, but you also pull him back into the hype.
Yeah.
I've noticed watching you guys as a duo that his energy level has changed a lot, and even his approach has changed just in working with you over the last, 2 years you guys have been working together as a duo? Just about. Yeah, I mean, 2018, you started doing stuff together. Yeah, it's been a while. Honestly, it has been a pleasure watching your career take off over the last 2 years. Watching you go from basically watching you go from a Reddit clip to a LAN event where you walked across Chinatown at 5 o'clock in the morning in Philadelphia. Not exactly the wisest decision, by the way.
It was nice out.
Yeah, right. And then slowly working your way up the ladder, grinding it out, eventually getting on more and more gigs, and now casting in front of large audiences and stadiums and 10,000 people. And I can't imagine you guys are far off from casting a major at this point, and I really hope that is what's coming for you guys. Who knows, with the Rio major now shifting to November, maybe they're going to bring in more people. It's a $2 million major. I have a feeling things are going to get amped up quite a bit, so I'm hoping that you guys get that call. But that is going to wrap things up for us on the show. Conner, I mean, thank you so much for joining me and taking us on a little dive back into your past and your history, explaining the ins and outs of the correctional system in Canada. It's not as pleasant as we'd all imagine it would be, with highs, A's, and maple syrup galore. But is there anything you want to say before we dip out?
Just a thanks to you, man. It was nice catching up, good having a conversation. And thanks to anybody who decided to watch and listen to us talk for all this time, Bach.
Yeah, again, this is Loosely Scripted. I am your host, Bach. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you next time.